Okay, let's start practicing determining inheritance mode in pedigrees. So our first question is dominant or recessive. Have a look at these two small pedigrees. These are two separate pedigrees, and perhaps sketch them out on a piece of paper and pause the video for a moment and see if you can work out possible modes of inheritance. And ask yourself these questions. Is it a dominant or recessive condition relative to the wild-type allele? And is it autosomal or sex-linked? So take a minute, pause the video, and see if you can work out the different possibilities. Try to figure out which are possible modes of inheritance for these two pedigrees. Okay, so hopefully you took the time to try to work this out for yourself. One of the things that you would have noticed is that in both pedigrees we have an affected child of unaffected parents. This is a diagnostic for a recessive condition. It's not possible to have a dominant condition where both parents are unaffected and there is an affected child. So these are recessive conditions. The next thing you'll notice is that autosomal recessive will work for either pedigree. So we represent an autosomal recessive condition simply by using letters, just like what we've done for the pea plants that we were talking about with Mendel. So for an autosomal condition, we simply use letters, and that tells us that we're representing it as an autosomal condition. Now, it's also possible for the one pedigree, the pedigree on the right, with the male offspring, to be a sex-linked recessive condition. So in this case, we actually can't tell. We would need more information and a larger pedigree to determine if this is a specific example of an autosomal recessive condition or a sex-linked condition. And you can see in this case, we can have two unaffected parents and an affected son, where it's the mother on the right there who is the carrier. Now, you'll notice we're using big A and little a again for this condition, but now we're modeling it as a sex-linked recessive. In order to model a condition as a sex-linked condition, you simply put the allele symbols of your choosing superscript to a large X. So females have XX, and males would have an X and a Y. Now, for the pedigree on the left, with the affected daughter of two unaffected parents, you'll notice that sex-linked recessive simply isn't going to work here. In order to have an affected daughter, we need a daughter who is X superscript little a, X superscript little a. That would mean that she would need to get one of her X chromosomes from her father, except her father is not affected. So what this means is that it's simply not possible to have an affected daughter of two unaffected parents and have it be a sex-linked recessive condition. So, put another way, if you see a situation where you have an affected daughter of two unaffected parents, this is now diagnostic for an autosomal recessive condition. It's not possible for this inheritance pattern to be displayed for a sex-linked recessive. Another way to put this is that males act as carriers, that's in quotation marks, for any sex-linked condition, anything that's on the X. The technical term for this is hemizygous. Hemi just meaning half, and zygous as in heterozygous, homozygous. Now we can define males as hemizygous. It means that they only have one copy of any given locus on the X chromosome, which means they only have one allele. So for this portion of the genome, these males are hemizygous. They only have one allele. Okay, for dominant phenotypes, an affected individual must have at least one affected parent. So here's another time to stop the video, work on these two pedigrees, and see if you can figure out all possible modes of inheritance. So pause the video and give it a go. Okay, hopefully you worked that through on your own. If you did, what you would have noticed is the following, that these have to be dominant conditions. It's not possible to have an unaffected child of two affected parents and it be a recessive condition. This means it's a dominant condition. And you'll notice that the condition on the left can be sex-linked dominant or autosomal dominant, but with the unaffected daughter on the far right, it's not possible for it to be a sex-linked dominant. Okay, with that introduction in hand, we'll now turn to an extended work example to solidify these concepts. For this pedigree, we'll work on inheritance mode first, then we'll assign genotypes as far as we possibly can, and then we'll work on probabilities. Specifically, we'll work towards figuring out the probability that the individual in the last generation, the first individual, so individual 3-1, will assign a probability that they will be affected with this condition.